Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is
Pat O'Sullivan.
Wow, Pat, you sound so chipper today.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad. Well, we were talking, before we started recording. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but like me and Pat don't like immediately jump into work. We actually we're friends and stuff when we talk about things.
Everything we do is documented and recorded for podcasting or something at a later date. Everything we do will eventually be monetized. We're just finding different outlets for it.
Yes. Hopefully. One of these days.
You've been podcasting long enough. So I did a podcast before this, and that's really fucked up when you get to that point where like you're having a conversation with your friends and you're like, oh wait, we should be recording this right now. And it's like, no, you probably shouldn't. Like, not everything that tumbles out of your mouth is fucking gold that needs to be like recorded and then posted on the internet. It is okay to have conversations sometimes with friends without it being recorded or documented or tweeted or anything.
It happens to me all the time, especially, making a documentary. It's like most of the stuff that happens is stuff that I'm not prepared to record. And I'm like, God damn it, I need to get like a GoPro or something and just have it on at all times because I can't make a lot of, any of this shit up for the most part. I mean, it's just so insane most of the time. But anyway, yeah, we were just, chit-chatting about the future of the podcast. So it looks like Pat is going to be a permanent fixture. So
yay!
I hope you guys are excited about that. As excited as he is, I think. I think it'll be cool. It'll still be the same format. It's still Weird Wednesdays. Nothing's changing there. If anything, major was going to happen, we'd definitely let you guys know. But, I didn't get to this point of this podcast by, changing it every week. So, or whatever. So, there's no intention there. It's just that, now you're going to hear this different voice. It's not to say that Ivy's never going to come back. She definitely might return and do like some guest spots and stuff like that. But she's just got, her own life and things, and it happens. So, here we are. So, but anyway, I was reading this study and, I'm a little bit of a science nerd, and especially when it comes to evolution. And, it's kind of weird actually how much, like, we really haven't, you and I have not discussed a lot of stuff. We really haven't had, that many. I think this is like what, our 5th or 6th episode together. I haven't been keeping track.
8.
Oh, is it really? Well,
yeah.
Glad to have you on board. Well, anyway, 8th, 6th, whatever. But we haven't talked about that much stuff compared to, I think me and Ivy were up to like episode 20, like I think it was like 20 or something like that. But
yeah,
we keep kind of cycling back to some of the same topics, and I just think that's kind of funny. And it's really not on purpose. It just so happens to be the timing. And, I do, this is what I do. This is my main job. I'm a Fortean investigator. So I'm really about kind of the news in the, in the group and, what's going on and what's new. Well, what's new this week is, there's been an ongoing study going on. And we have, yet again, come to an evolutionary, not juncture, but, we've discovered something new in humans. And it's not crazy new. Evolution takes a long time to take place. However, we've noted that this is definitely an evolutionary thing and not a genetic mutation. We have an extra artery now that we weren't seeing before. And it's in the forearm.
What do you mean we weren't? Okay.
It's just something that we weren't familiar with us having. So here's the thing. In the 19th century, the median artery that's in the forearm, about 10% of people were born with it. And, what we're finding is, as people die, we go back in. We don't normally like eviscerate people and, pull out their arteries.
Yeah.
So, when we are looking for that kind of stuff, it just goes off of basically people that have died and things like that. But like I said, back then in the 19th century, about 10% of people had this artery in their forearm. But we found that people in the 20th century, about 30% have it. So it is growing. So we are changing, right, to have more people born with it. I don't know if I have it. I don't know if you have it, but, and that 30%.
Does it offer any?
I'm sorry.
does it offer any kind of like benefit to having it? Like, does it increase blood flow to your arms and make you, I don't know, be able to like swing a knife faster or something? Like, is there?
I think probably the added benefit to it is likely because of our diet, because our diet is so
Okay.
poor, so it would increase circulation.
Huh.
But that's purely speculation on my part. I don't think we've really gone in much to studies about what it's doing for us, because we've kind of just recognized that it's even there, and it's a part of our evolutionary stages. So, but that would be,
Wow.
I mean, honestly, I mean, it sounds really bad, but that would be my guess. Because we have, gotten shittier with our diets, and not just the diets, but our activity, because things have just been made easier we don't have to hunt for food anymore. And, stuff like that, when you can just drive up to the old Mickey D's and get a couple burgers and, eat them. So I don't know, but that's probably increased again. We're talking, 19th century compared to the 20th century, and we're already 20 years into the 21st century. So, um,
Mm.
who knows what it is now. And then, of course, as we know, when numbers start increasing, they increase, faster. So, probably, even more people. So it's like interesting to think about that. Like, my daughter most likely has it, but like, I might not, but I thought that was cool. I think it's fun when we have that proof, kind of in our hands. And evolutionary
Yeah.
tracking is new, it's pretty new for us. So,
And it's got to kind of give you hope too, because it shows that this isn't our final form,
right.
that we are still evolving as a species, even if it's something as benign as an extra artery in the arm. Like,
Right.
if that's what we can track, who knows what else is potentially there, as
Yeah.
far as like neurological development or, brain, or definitely like our culture is,
Right.
as far as what we were doing. I mean, we're not perfect, obviously. We don't live in a utopia, but
Yeah.
it's getting a little bit better. I feel like overall, big picture, we're treating each other a little bit nicer than we did 200-300 years ago.
You'd like to think, huh? I mean, that's
Yeah, I don't know. That's debatable. It's probably another show for another time. But you know, I think we're making advancements.
I think for the most part, yeah. I definitely see it, and we're both parents. We both have kids, and I mean, basically the same I mean, they're the same generation, I believe.
Oh yeah,
And so they're, and we can see, the changes in them and the way that people, parents, stuff like that, to see where the changes have come from. So yeah, I think we've definitely gotten a little nicer to each other, which is good. We're supposed to. But yeah, no, I thought that was cool. And then another cool thing was there was pictured a giant butterfly in Chernobyl.
kill it.
No, it's it's sacred, Patty. Leave it alone. They don't know if it's kind of the same token. They don't know if it's evolutionary, but they kind of have a feeling that it's probably mutated. No, it's not
Sure.
like massive or anything. It's just kind of bird sized instead of butterfly sized. But I think that that's really fun because we're still studying things like Chernobyl and radiation and what it's doing to the environment. The interesting thing that happened was when we had Chernobyl, when we had was it Fukushima, when those things happened, the most affected thing out there was not it wasn't like the deer and shit. It was the insects. Most of the insects couldn't survive. Because typically they're, the bottom of the food chain. So, they're eating the plants that are extremely radiated, and they're living in the water and drinking the water and stuff like that. And then, then it's we've got our predators that go after them, and then they weren't there anymore. So it's interesting because in both cases, in Chernobyl and Fukushima, butterflies kind of left for a long time. They died, and then now they're coming back, but they're coming back bird sized. So I don't know what you guys want to do with that information, but we got giant butterflies, and I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. So,
Well, I mean, we know how giant butterflies. I mean, they were. I'm sorry, my kid just walked in. That's for my debit card. I'm trying not to fucking lose my shit on him right now. Mothra joke, I guess. Insert Mothra joke here. I'm sorry. Once again, giant butterflies like the extra artery in the arms, very benign on the surface, but hint at potentially much larger issues
Right.
on the horizon.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's well, and Chernobyl has supposedly a Mothman sighting before everything happened.
yeah. You know what? I don't know if it was either you or Tobias that were telling me about that. I think it was Tobias because when I interviewed him, it was when that show was really popular on HBO, and I think we were talking about it or he mentioned it.
Was it on the show? Do you know?
No, 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 no. It
Oh,
definitely
that's pretty
wasn't.
cool.
But he had mentioned that, and I was like, really? And I think he didn't think it was very substantiated, but it was definitely one of the lore that was going
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know,
Yeah, I like Tobias. He's definitely a lot more. He's a lot more into the biological side of things rather than the
paranormal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think he kind of has an interest in it. I think you have to in order to be into any of this, but I think that, he believes in the science that we can prove or that we're already familiar with, and that's fine.
Yeah,
That's why I like him, because he has a different perspective than I do, and so he shares things with me,
sure.
and whatever. But yeah, the Black Brita of Chernobyl, it was a thing. People claim that they saw this giant black flying creature. I mean, they didn't call it the Mothman. That's the thing about the Mothman. People don't realize is that they see it all over the world, but they don't call it the same thing. It's got its own
Right.
nickname, just like whatever, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, Yowie, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Or the Dogman.
The Dogman, yes, the dog, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, the Dogman, yeah, has a. We talked about that
Right.
this week.
We almost talked about it.
We almost talked.
But
Well, yes. So I'm trying to figure out the situation with that, but we'll get to Dogman.
But that was not just to kind of glance over it real quick.
Yeah,
That's something that's such an interesting cryptid because it has so many different names. They're basically fucking
it's
werewolves.
basically
You
a
know what I mean?
werewolf. Yeah,
And yeah, but I mean, one of those things where it's like it has different names in different regions and different mythological implications and stuff. But it's kind of so you could see the Mothman being the same thing where it's you have to look at what the common denominators are, and not get so hung up on like the Mothman aspect of it, but what actually is being spotted and the characteristics, the behavior,
because it doesn't
you know
look
what
like
I
a
mean?
moth. Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, different people can describe things different ways. I mean, you look at some guys look at thick girls and go, "That's fucking gross," and some guys look at a thick girl and say lunch. And it's just.
How do you
I,
compare big girls to the Mothman, Pat? I don't.
I'm just, it's like, what did you see up in that tree? And it's like, I don't know. It looked like a fucking moth, dude. It looked like a moth. It looked like a moth,
Moth,
man. And then
dude.
some people are like, no, that looked like I don't know.
It was a dark figure with glowing red eyes. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I mean, that's like even like the Mothman statue, like that's like been kind of come to be what people expect the Mothman to look like. It doesn't really look anything like the actual accounts of the Mothman. Nobody ever, like, first of all, the thing's got fucking cornrows. It does. I'm dead serious, and I don't understand where that came from. It's ripped as fuck. I don't know.
went on vacation down to Cabo.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know what they were thinking when they made that statue. But like now, like I said, that's kind of, that's what's stuck now. That's what everybody thinks of when they think of the Mothman. And it's like, that really doesn't look anything like it, what anybody described ever. So
Right.
I don't know. Okay. I guess it's got the red eyes, and wings. So, and the wings even have like holes in them. Like that's kind of like appropriate or misappropriating the Mothman, isn't it?
Right. Well, it's because moths eat like fabric, so I don't know.
So is he eating his own wings? Is that the implication there? Maybe I should like try to contact the artist or something. I guess I've never really looked into
You're like, this picture isn't aerodynamically accurate. How would it fly if it had holes in its wings? What the fuck? You guys aren't even trying at this point.
I don't know what his deal is, but yeah, it's so weird. Like I said, well, they gave him this and everybody knows he's got the most ripped ass I've ever seen in my entire life, especially on a Mothman. And
oh, you haven't been to Chicago, so you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
what do you mean? Are you trying to toot your own horn there, Pat? Is that what you're doing? I can't say anything. I have no ass. I have all tits. I have no ass.
And belts.
And belts.
We're gonna get the belts. They accessorize very
I've
well.
got the largest belts that you've ever seen.
Yeah. God.
That's great. I do have a lot of those big belts. I've got like different ones with like different things on that, like buckles, I guess. But they're meant to be worn on the waist, not on the they're meant to be worn on the underbust, not on the actual waist.
Mm-hmm.
They're just fashionable.
They're
They serve
very
purpose.
sharp.
Yeah, it's no
Very
purpose.
sharp.
This is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, Chernobyl butterflies. They're getting bigger, guys. Be careful. Don't go out there, or they'll, I don't know, eat your families. I don't know. I don't know what the threat is yet, but it's just interesting, because like I said, they really don't know if it's something that they've evolved into, or because of the radiation. I'm willing to bet probably radiation. However, most of the time things don't mutate with radiation sickness like that. They don't mutate like physically. Typically, if there's a mutation, it's like a cell mutation, and then that cell mutation turns into cancer and it dies.
Well, I mean that wasn't that long ago. I mean that was like what, 25 years or something like that.
Yeah,
I think we're still maybe 35 because it was the mid 80s when it happened. So yeah, it was probably like 30, 35 years ago. I mean, we have no idea what to expect out of that region.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're only a couple life cycles into the fauna kind of in that area developing, and I mean, I'm sure in the coming years we'll see even more crazy shit come out of there,
right,
that we didn't see at first because it wasn't safe for us to go in there and look. You know what I mean?
Nuclear radiation in general is still pretty, I mean, it's still pretty new to us.
Oh yeah, yeah. So who knows what'll come crawling out of that fucking city?
It'll be
that crater.
Nothing good, I can tell you that.
Right.
Giant butterflies. Well, anyway, so this week we are going to talk about a very interesting subject that I happened to learn about when I was young, and was led to believe when I was very young that this would be a bigger threat than it has been. Even though I still think it's a very valid threat, I think it's a valid threat for different reasons, and I'll explain why. But we are going to talk about the new Madrid. Is it Madrid or Madrid? I think it's Madrid, right? That's correct.
I mean, so it was weird. I would just say Madrid, but that's probably wrong. That's my Midwestern
tomato. Is that what it is?
My Midwestern accent revealing itself. Yeah, the new Madrid fault system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and prophecies surrounding it, or predictions about it.
Kind of what it is. So to explain basically what it is that it's this big fucking fault line that sits in the middle of the Midwest that doesn't really do a bunch. It has produced small earthquakes over the years. But the problem is that, like, for the most part, yes, it's got these tiny earthquakes, but like when it decides to fuck shit up, it fucks shit up.
Yeah, the fault line itself is kind of at where the nexus of St. Louis, Illinois, and Arkansas are. Yeah. So that's kind of where conventional, I mean, because obviously, there's no way to know for sure. Like they're not digging tunnels.
And it's not like linear, and it's not like circular.
Right, exactly.
Like
yeah,
so,
it's like
it branches out.
It's a vein that runs through the crust, the mantle. Right. And it's down there, but there's activity that's been strong, measurable activity that's been attributed to that fault line. Goes all the way from Dayton to Iowa, right? And doesn't go too far north. Indianapolis, Dayton, that's kind of like as far north as it goes, right, into the Midwest. But as far as the east and west goes, it's a pretty wide reach. And then of course, south as well. So it's got a pretty wide breadth, and it's one of the it's next to like the San Andreas stuff and all the shit in California and the West Coast. It's the most extensive active fault system in the United States. Right. Do you want to?
Yeah. So
I mean, I could run with this, so I'm letting you
no,
do
no,
your
no, no.
thing
So
before.
I mean, so I'll start with the one of the things that I've been more intrigued in looking into. I'm not much of a um religious person, or even much into like looking into the prophecies and stuff. As a matter of fact, when you had mentioned that there was prophecy surrounding it, I was not aware. When you had first kind of brought it up to me, the first thing I went to was the science behind it, because again, I was taught this at a young age, and I was taught that there will come a time where this will produce not just a singular giant earthquake, but multiple giant earthquakes that is basically going to be probably the end of the Midwest is kind of what we were taught, and I was taught this in school, and so that that's always kind of been my idea of it. But what I know is that in which ended up being another synchronicity for me, which again, had I been recording for the documentary, it would have made sense. But in 1811, on December 16th, this thing went off. It decided to go ahead and produce a very massive earthquake that destroyed a good chunk of Missouri, and specifically St. Louis in general, and thousands of structures destroyed. I think there was like a crazy amount of people that died. There was like 15,000 people or something. I don't know if that's the number or not, but it was in the thousands of people died.
The earthquake was so intense that the Mississippi River actually flowed backwards for a
Yes.
couple hours.
Yeah, it did. Well, and then so then it happened then, and then it happened again in January. It had a not as an intense one. I think the one that they measured, they believe the first one, which again this was the early 1800s, 1811. So we really didn't have the science then to measure it, but we believe it was probably an 8.0 magnitude earthquake.
Yeah, it was December of 1811 through March of 1812.
Yeah.
There was a whole series of large scale earthquakes and then aftershocks and stuff as well.
Well,
So
there
it
was
was
three very, very large ones, and there was the one in December that hit that was very large. Then there was one in January, and then another one in March, which they believe is even larger than the one that hit in December.
mm,
Is what I was reading about it, and and then of course, like you said, there's aftershocks, and it just kind of continued, and they were like, is it done? Is it gonna stop? A lot of people, that did survive it, they left and they never came back. They were like, fuck that. So, which is probably smart, I guess. Obviously we know St. Louis is not uninhabited, so some people are,
yeah, but they built that crazy big fucking arch.
yeah,
Like Jesus.
yeah.
Like that's the last kind of structure you want to be in when a fucking earthquake hits.
You guys can't afford to have aesthetic here. What are you doing? Yeah.
Or at least build a giant ass trampoline underneath it. I mean, Jesus.
I don't know if that's a good idea either. Then you just have people like everybody get on the trampoline when it's happening and just see what happens. But yeah, so it was a big deal. We really didn't know how to cope with something like that. And the thing about science is that we cannot tell you when exactly things will happen. We just know that like this will happen again. We know it will. And there's about a 10% chance that it will happen within the next 50 years. And
Okay.
so it's due to happen again. Something ones that are that large. Now again, it produces earthquakes. Still.
Oh yeah.
They're very small. We've had
I
two
mean,
of them in Ohio.
yeah, we have them in Illinois, mostly downstate,
Yeah.
and nothing exorbitant. But I mean, yeah, there was an earthquake when I was in like grammar school, like 8th grade, and there was another one. I mean, these weren't like crazy, like toppling buildings, but feelable. You know what I mean?
I see.
Like
I've
people,
never felt an earthquake. I can't say I've never been through one because, again, like I said, we've had two of them within the last couple years, and I want to say it's even been like within the last like 3 years. It's been very recent. We've had two,
yeah.
and which was worrisome, which kind of brought this all back up again, for me personally. But I never felt them. I don't know what an earthquake feels like. I imagine it's not fun.
I haven't either. No. The one in grammar school I slept through,
Yeah,
and the one in high school, I just remember seeing people writing about it on LiveJournal, and I was like,
right.
huh? And I had no idea it had happened. Like if I was just completely oblivious. I was probably drunk at the time or
When I
something.
watched when I watched New Nightmare as a kid, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I
Oh, of
assumed
course.
that earthquakes would be a bigger issue in my life, and I've never
Same
experienced
thing.
one.
There was a great fucking meme that was like, if you could go back and tell your younger self like anything, what would it be? And it's like not to worry so much about
Yeah,
quicksand.
right. I know. It's like,
Because it's like quicksand and earthquakes like it fascinated and terrified me as a 9-year-old, and like I
right.
haven't seen either one of them
Oh
in
God,
my
when I'm an adult, life's gonna be so hard. I'm gonna fall into quicksand during an
quicksand.
earthquake, and
Yeah. Just be like, I knew it.
right. And so, yeah, neither of those things have happened. So, so I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know much about earthquakes because it's not a regular occurrence here. So I don't even know if it's like normal for you to just be like going about your day and then like all of a sudden the world's moving.
Sure.
But so we're threatened with this big, um, this big significant event that will eventually happen. And what I've always heard is that when this happens, when this earthquake goes off, it's going to activate Yellowstone. And Yellowstone's another thing that I've heard about. So,
The cold era. Yeah. Yeah. I mean that they they included that in the 2012 movie. So I think that's on a lot of people's radars now.
yeah,
But for those of us that are fucking lunatics, we've been
yeah,
worrying about that for
forever. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
you know.
I'm like, I know one of these days, man, that volcano is going to go off and I'm going to be fucked. So,
That's it. That's it. That's all she wrote. People, like that was our biggest concern was that like that's an automatic killer, and not even like automatic as in instantaneous, because you probably have a good hour before you fucking die from it.
yeah,
But once that thing goes off, that's like hitting the reset button on humanity
yeah.
because there's no coming back from it once that shit gets released in the air.
Well, right. And we've seen that time and time again. Whole civilizations destroyed because of volcanoes or, whatever.
Yeah.
Just these big, crazy things that can happen. But yeah, so but that's always something I've heard. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't even know if they know if that's accurate or not. You know what I mean? I don't know if the science knows. I think they're just like, well, we weren't really here when it happened the first time, but like the volcano didn't go off then, so we'll just see what happens. Well, they won't be here for it. The people that study this shit, they've definitely got bunkers or a safe space somewhere. Because
Well, but how good does a bunker do you? And when you're talking about a massive
lava.
earthquake, yeah,
Well, that's true. Earthquake, yeah. Their bunker's probably just somewhere that's very far away from here.
sure.
But we won't know. As far as I know, we can't even pinpoint it down to like, we won't even be prepared. Like if the sun dies, we'll know that it died. And we can just kind of prepare the nation, the whole world for the fact that we're going to die in the next so many hours. But like, can we prepare for this earthquake? Will we know before it happens? We just know cycles, and we could probably tell based off of certain things. Animal life actually is really receptive to these things. Animals know when this shit's going to happen.
Right.
So studying them, we would probably be able to have some type of idea, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to. So, I think that they wouldn't even tell us anyway to avoid the panic.
There was an episode of. Are you familiar with the show Mr. Belvedere?
Uh-uh.
Oh my god! So for anyone that's older than you, which I would assume is most of your male listeners, there was an episode of Mr. Belvedere where an earthquake hit, and one of the ways that they telegraphed it was that one of the characters, because it's shot on like a soundstage, right? And one of the characters like looks out like the fake front door and goes, "Mom and Dad, all the birds are disappearing," and that was like the precursor to like the earthquake hitting the
Oh,
the Mr. Belvedere house. And that always stuck with me as like such a weird thing to include. Like, were they trying to like do a public service by like teaching us that like when the birds disappear? Well, obviously now we know birds aren't real, and then
oh
Obama
yeah,
killed them
right.
all in
So I
28.
mean,
But this was before that. This is when there actually were still birds
when we
out
still
there.
had birds
Yeah,
before
before
Obama.
before Obama, before the Muslims killed them all. But yeah, so that was great moments in earthquake pop culture, I guess.
And Mr. Belvedere.
I can't believe you've never fucking heard of Mr. Belvedere.
I don't think I've ever heard of Mr. Belvedere. How old is Mr. Belvedere?
Now, oh geez, he was. It was. Oh, you know what? This is crazy. What? This is direct connection to you. it was about a family, and they're a blue collar, I believe, Ohio family,
Oh,
because the dad, the patriarch of the family, is played by Bob Uecker, who of course you know from the Cleveland Indians, I would assume, right?
no, I don't sports ball, so.
Oh, you! I'm not even a sports person. I know who the fuck Bob Uecker is. Jesus Christ. Yes. So Bob Uecker was like a baseball player turned announcer or something. He was in the major league movies and shit. And so he's kind of like this like roughneck blue collar guy. And Mr. Belvedere was like this British like servant that works in their house for some reason.
Okay.
And I don't know why I'm spending this much time talking about Mr. Belvedere now. But yeah, it was a sitcom in the 80s
Well, I'm surprised
that
too. Like usually when
had
things
an
take
earthquake
place in
episode.
Ohio, we are, everybody in Ohio's like, yeah, Ohio. We think we're like, so Ohio is like the American of the United States, if that makes sense. We're the best of the best. There's nobody better than us. We're the Ohio. And like that's what I say. Like that's what I tell people, like when I travel and stuff, especially like to Michigan. So like I'll go to Michigan and we have a direct football rivalry with Michigan. And but I go there about twice a year. And every time I go, everybody in Ohio is like, ew, why would you want to go to Michigan when you could be in Ohio? And I'm like, eh. And then I go to Michigan and everybody there is like, oh, you're from Ohio? That's great. What area?
Everyone there's like, want meth?
Right. It's terrible. Like
Don't
Ohioans,
mind if I do.
they're so fucking, they're so full of themselves. So like I said, when anything takes place here, they're like, oh, like Tommy Boy takes place in Ohio. That's, and it's a big deal. What's his name? The Cleveland Rocks show guy, Drew Carey.
Drew Carey, yeah.
I mean, to Ohioans, that's like the greatest thing ever. And it's like, this is like, none of this is even like a good depiction of Ohio.
The Ohio has a tendency to ship its women to Illinois, specifically Chicago. Like there is so many Ohio girls in Chicago that there's bars, several plural bars in Lincoln Park that are just like Ohio, like because you guys are the Buckeyes, right?
Yeah.
They're like Buckeye bars where like it's owned by Ohio people, and all the Ohio people that live in Chicago now go drink there. And I made this, one of my most popular tweets was like, something was so Chicago, like I don't know, like beef sandwiches are so Chicago that they fucked two girls from Ohio already. Because like when you're in your 20s, there's so many, like, and you start dating chicks online, like you're gonna bag Ohio chicks because they're all over the place, they don't know anybody. And then like they all move to Lincoln Park because it's the nice part of the city, but they inevitably start banging Southside guys because we're more we're like not Lincoln Park dudes. Like we're a little rough around the edges like they're used to.
Oh yeah, and it
So
reminds them of home. So
yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it. So like, oh my God, like your number one natural export is like Bob Pollard songs and fucking girls.
I believe that. That's like the thing about like Ohio. And I was like thinking about this the other day because, for a long time, because I want to move. I definitely want to move out of Ohio. As a matter of fact, recently I've been playing with the idea of moving out of the country completely. And, but moving out of Ohio has been something I want to do for a long time. Now, everybody that lives in Ohio wants to move out of Ohio. And a lot of us do. Actually, Ohioans travel quite a fucking bit. And what we do, and then we always end up like coming back home. And so, but what I've noticed is that like, because we're so eclectic and we have like fucking literally everything here, and we pretty much have everything here. Like we've seen it all. So like we go somewhere else and we're not really impressed by those things because well, we've got those in Ohio. We just don't have them like, like you guys might have. Well, just like going to Arkansas, there's mountains and it's beautiful. They're beautiful mountains. We don't really have mountains in Ohio, but we have like some pretty ginormous hills. I mean, we are, we're not all flat land. We do have, beautiful stuff like that. So it's like, going out to the mountains, like, yeah, they're just like big hills. I mean, we have those, I don't need to come here for these. I have these. And, it's just how it feels. Like I said, if you go anywhere, even if you go out to fucking LA, you're like, oh yeah, big city, party life. I have that in Ohio too. So it's just, it's one of those things. And that's why I think people end up coming back is because we expect it to be so much more. But what we don't realize is that since we have it already, I mean, we have a little bit of everything. So it's like,
Well,
well,
yeah, especially now that we live in the Amazon age. Like I have my in-laws live in rural Indiana,
yeah,
and I mean they have access to all of the cable channels that I do.
right,
They get the internet, which means they can have Amazon delivered anything that they want on their front
right,
doorstep. It was different, maybe even 20 years ago, when like you would want to go to a big city because they had like more diverse bookstores or record stores, and
right,
if I wanted to get this new like Naked Raygun album, like I couldn't get it anywhere in Ohio. There was one music store that maybe ordered like obscure punk rock records, but now you just go online and it's like
you get it
or
all.
like movies, like the good movies never come to Ohio. All we get is like the Disney movies or the latest Die Hard, and that's it. If I want to go see Roger and Me, or if I want to go see Human Centipede 2, I have to drive 6 hours to
Right.
Cincinnati or Cleveland or something. And it's like, no, you watch it on video on demand, like fucking everything else. So
Yeah,
we're totally like moving to this thing where the appeal of big city life was that you had access to more things
yeah.
that you couldn't get in these smaller towns.
Hmm.
But because of fucking Amazon and because of video on demand, you can't even that benefit is like kind of slowly going
Yeah,
by
you
the
don't even have to.
wayside.
Well,
And
and
all
maybe it's
big
because
city life really has is higher property fucking taxes and
yeah,
like more
right.
crime.
Right. At the same time, yeah. Well, I mean, and maybe I have a bias because for the most part, I mean, I've grown up in the big cities in Ohio. So I'm not from the rural, yes, I'm from Ohio, but I'm not from, the middle of fucking nowhere, where I've always been in the big city. And so it's like, so we have things like counterculture and then like, just I shit on a lot, but going back again to Arkansas, they really don't have that anywhere except for one city in the entire state. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that. They have one big city, and that's Little Rock. And
Yeah.
right, and it's just a shithole, and it's like, so but they don't have this, and like, so I'm like, oh well, I'd probably miss that, but it's like, because I have that when I go to if I go to New York City, you know, yes, it has counterculture and it has it in abundance compared to like we have it, it's just enough. It's like, oh well, that's great, like this was great and wonderful, but like I'd also like to drive 20 minutes to the west and go out to my big hills, and I can't do that in New York City. So anyway, that's Ohio life for you. It's not terrible. There's a lot to do. Visit Ohio. It's actually very nice.
You know, when we go visit my wife's family, I'll go to like there's a punk bar in Fort Wayne called the Brass Rail, and we'll go there, and it's the same, you know, big titty punk chicks with cat eye glasses and shitty sleeve tattoos that we have at the Chicago punk bars.
Right.
It's really not, and they're both listening to Against Me. Like
Yeah.
it's not any different. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're both they read the same books, they listen to the same music, they watch the same movies. A little bit different. Maybe the Fort Wayne people are a little bit better with their hands, but there's no difference. And I think like you're talking about counterculture. Yeah, that's assuming that you're going to these big cities because you want to like hang out with people.
Right.
Like I'm antisocial at this point. Like I don't. This is the most human interaction I have with anyone outside of my family or my workplace all week. And
Oh
I'm
no.
talking to you through a microphone on my head, and I'm not even looking at you. Like I'm looking at a web page right now. Um, so like I think that like it's funny that like you're at the point where you're like, yeah, I think I'm really putting thought into moving to a big city. It's like I want to move to a smaller town. You know what I mean? That's the point that I'm getting at in my life, where like I like being here and it's cool, and I'm glad I had this kind of upbringing and I was exposed to this kind of stuff. But like 20 years ago was different. 30 years ago was different. It was a great place to go to high school. Let me put it like that. You know what I mean? I got to see a lot of cool shit, and I got to take the bus to a lot of interesting places and stuff. But now, because of the internet, because of everything else, I feel like all that stuff, all that leg up that we had on the competition has gone out the window, and now we just have race riots and gun violence and shit. It's
Well,
just
that's
like,
true. Well, like my thing about like wanting to move out, like move and go somewhere is that like right now, I am exactly where I need to be for what I am doing career wise because I'm working on this documentary and I'm in the perfect spot to work on it because everything's pretty central to me. It's not that bad. Like, I've got West Virginia's 2 hours away, and then, once I'm there, like, sure, then we're talking, 5 hours max, depending on what I'm doing. And then, I need to go up to Chicago and study the Mothman there. And that's, 6 hours and still drivable. It's doable. And, Kentucky, I need to go to Kentucky. I've got leads there that I need to follow. So I'm right where I need to be for what I'm working on. So for the moment, it's good. And I've played with the idea of like just purchasing a home here in Ohio and having my home base here, but traveling, because eventually I'm going to have to branch out and travel further to go investigate other things. But I think that's kind of my big thing, is that I want to be able to have the freedom to go other places, because I do like to go get into the culture of other areas and stuff like that. Even the small town places, I really do enjoy, feeling like I'm a part of their community. That's why I like Point Pleasant. Point Pleasant is gross. West Virginia is fucking gross, but they're so fucking nice there. That's one thing that we don't have here in Ohio. People are not fucking nice here. Like, they're just not. They're assholes, and I can't explain it. But because I do traveling and stuff a lot, like, I notice the big difference.
The girls are friendly.
The girls are friendly. Shut up. That's because we're used to being treated like shit by all the dudes in Ohio.
Are you insinuating that I treated any of those fine people like shit? Not at all.
I'm just saying, that's what we're used to. I guess that's probably why I have a thing for dating people that don't live in Ohio. Like, it's not. I don't know why. It's just like,
because that way you don't have to deal with them, because they don't live in Ohio.
That's probably why. It's safe. I'm like, good. They can't bother me.
Right.
I can be my own person.
You can make an appointment to see me in 2 weeks, and then
right.
that's when we'll hang out.
I'll make sure the other boyfriend's gone by the time you get here. That's probably what it is. I don't know. Something's wrong with me. Anyway, none of this has anything to do with what we were talking about.
You know how we got off on this tangent?
Talking about Ohio?
Mr. Belvedere.
Mr. Belvedere, you're right.
We went down a
that out.
fucking 10-minute rabbit hole because of Mr. Belvedere.
Fucking Mr. Belvedere.
Jesus.
Oh, well, I mean, what do you guys think of Mr. Belvedere? Did you watch it? Was it your thing? Is it like a comedy? Was it like a sitcom?
Yeah, it was a sitcom. Yeah, it was a single camera, multi-camera sitcom, filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Oh.
Like Growing Pains or like Friends or anything like on a soundstage somewhere. But
yeah. Okay, all right. Well,
whatever.
So on to the more ominous part of it. So we've kind of covered scientifically what to expect. What is this? It's weird. It's kind of a doomsday thing. But what's the supernatural side of it, Pat? You have this guy.
Yes. So so basically there's a lot of, if you go online, there's a lot of end times prophecies centered around the New Madrid fault line. And a lot of them, the majority of them focus on a earthquake hitting Chicago, which, if you remember 20 minutes ago before we got on the whole diatribe about fucking Mr. Belvedere, the fault system doesn't necessarily extend that far north. But it is in the area, it is in the region. Chicago is kind of the Paris of the Midwest. And when you talk about Midwestern Bible Belt prophets, quote unquote prophets, making doomsday predictions, to some farmer in Idaho, it's real easy to point to the great city of Chicago and say this city will be struck down by an earthquake, right? Because earthquakes are in the region, they're kind of culturally, historically known. And, for a certain segment of the population, New York is whatever and LA is whatever, but Chicago is kind of like in the crosshairs when it comes to a big city full of sin and all those things that small town life is trying to shun.
But you guys are basically surrounded by small town.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at our state in general. It's us, and then it's fucking farmers from
Illinois, right?
Right, which creates like
state,
which is why we always have Republican governors, is because the majority of the state, and there's so much friction there, is because, not to get super into politics, but when you look at our state taxes, so much of that is like, so much of our state policy is built around what's happening in this one small little section of the state,
right?
Chicago, but you have, which takes up maybe 10% of the land.
Right.
And 90% of it is like farmland, and you have farmers, and you have whatever the fuck is down there.
Right.
And but at the same time, uh, how much power do we command in the state Congress, because state government, because this is like where all the money is too, right?
Right.
Anyway, so Chicago's kind of an easy target for these Midwestern doomsday prophets that like to say that we're going to be destroyed by a giant earthquake. And there's one guy in particular that I think we're going to spend the majority of the show talking about, Chuck Youngbrandt. He had a Chicago earthquake prophecy back in the 70s that gained a lot of traction, became very popular in the people that I don't want to obviously not like, Jaws popular, but I mean, if you're one of those people that follows doomsday predictions, this guy is kind of a person to know. But it also spawned a lot of, if you go on YouTube and just do like a quick search for Chicago earthquake prophecy, there are several hundreds from completely different people, all foretelling the destruction of Chicago by a giant earthquake.
Right.
And what makes so that in and of itself obviously caught my interest. When this first popped up on my radar, I spent about 7 years of my life working midnights downtown.
Right.
And if anyone's ever worked midnights before, there's a reason Coast to Coast airs from midnight till 4 a.m. Like that's the fucking time, man. And I listened to a lot of Coast to Coast, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Something that always kind of resonated with me were these tsunami videos, right?
Yeah.
Because that kind of happened around that time. I worked midnights from about 2008 to 2015. And I think that's kind of like when the Indonesian or the Philippines tsunami hit, was somewhere in there. And there was a couple of them. But, there's something about that water that I don't know if I necessarily believe in past lives or anything, but if I were to, what the reason I would say that I believe in a past life is because there's something about tsunamis and seeing that water and seeing that stuff that like really triggers something in me
Okay.
that kind of takes my breath away and really gets my interest. And just kind of through going through YouTube one night and Googling random shit, I came across Chuck Youngbrandt's Chicago earthquake prophecy. And what this prophecy states is that that there'll be the new Madrid fault line is going to go off. It's going to go off pretty much right through the city of Chicago. And not only is it going to do massive damage to the city itself, but it's going to create a tsunami in Lake Michigan that will back up into Lake Superior and then combine both of those Great Lakes and come flooding towards the city of Chicago, that it's going to be hit with like an ocean level tsunami. And we'll get into the Great Lakes in a second if you're not familiar. But that ocean level tsunami, something that you would see off the coast of Japan or California or something like that, is going to come barreling through Chicago, outwards towards the Midwest, come down south through the Mississippi River, and basically cause a path of destruction right down the center of the United States. And it's going to wipe out a whole bunch of cities, kill a whole bunch of people, basically destabilize the United States. And there's a second part to the prophecy that we'll get to in a little bit. So this is kind of as long as Ashley and I have been talking, this is an idea that like I was like, oh, we got to do something about this. We got to do something about this.
Something you're excited about.
Right, because number one, I fucking live here.
Yeah.
so obviously any prophecy that foretells the destruction of my hometown, I'm gonna kind of sit up and take notice to. But Chuck Youngbrandt's dramatic and detailed prophetic vision from 1973 needs to be read to be believed. And I don't know how much time you want me to spend reading quotes from it. But I mean, this guy, and you can find the prophecy online all over the place. There's one website, Why God Really, because this kind of ties into like end times, rapture, tribulation, I think is what they, because I always forget the names for all the different parts of like the end of the world.
Yeah.
But I think this isn't rapture, because rapture is when everyone disappears, right?
Yeah.
Tribulation is like the 7 years of fucked up shit that happens before the rapture. This is tribulation. So this is tribulation prophecy, right? And he writes such a detailed account of what happens. And the thing is that he writes about at using like Chicago landmarks. Like he talks about fucking Villa Park and like driving on the tri-state and stuff, and like, which if you're actually from here is like, wow, like it makes me think that like he legitimately had these visions. Now, whether or not they're just like psychobilly freakouts or something, like I don't know, they're like necessarily like visions from God, but like, dude, he gets in real detail about the destruction of Chicago and the western suburbs, and he writes it very dramatically, very detailed, and it's horrifying, but at the same time, it's like totally captivating.
Yeah.
So
It is really interesting. I mean, has anybody? I didn't. I guess I didn't think to look into that until now. But I mean, has a scientist went up against him and been like, well, that can't
well,
happen because of this science stuff.
so not necessarily. So Chuck Youngbrandt went on to make several predictions, none of which ever came true. He was one of these guys that was like always saying that like in 2 years something was going to happen. I think but he became kind of famous in his own right. Like, what is the name of his ministry? Hold on, the Staff and Sword Ministry. I mean, he released some books that are available. He started his own ministry group. He has a couple books that are available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. So he's a published author. Like he made a business out of this. And I believe his first and most captivating one was the Chicago earthquake prophecy. Mm-hmm. But he went on to be one of these prophets that constantly foretold the end of mankind and the return of Jesus Christ and all this stuff. And people eat that shit up.
Yeah. You know? Well, because this isn't like a, you know, he's not a scientist. He hasn't like sat down and been like, oh shit, I'm a scientist and I made this discovery that this could happen. He has visions.
Right. And his science proven him wrong. Science has proven him wrong several times. Sure. Because he would go on to make more detailed predictions that would just like not happen, right? And there was no date for the Chicago earthquake prophecy. In fact, he made it in 1973. So like it was around for a while and he never said when it was going to happen. And then, you know, obviously around the year 2000, I think it's going to happen. And then around the year 2012, he died in 2018. But there was still people that would say that this was coming. I mean, as far back, if you go on YouTube now, there's people that say that it's going to happen in 2020 still. There's people that say it was going to happen in October, this month. Like this gets dragged out. This is like, you know, if you're part of that like doomsday, that Christian doomsday cult bullshit, this is something that gets dragged out every so often. Right. It's in rotation basically. And part of the reason why, and I'm already getting to the kind of like the second half of this, is that the second part of Chuck's prophecy is that after the United States is destroyed because of this earthquake, Russia and China would then invade the United States once it's been destabilized. Oh, yeah. And then the United States would be occupied for 7 years, and that would be this tribulation. And of course, the Asians were going to rape all the women and stuff like that, which is like, what the fuck is that? But they always seem to work it in there about like being raped by an occupying force.
Right. And, yeah.
You know, the country is going to be taken over. We're going to be nuked, and then our allies, and then Israel is going to fucking do something, and then Jesus comes back, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, so like, I mean, the reason why I asked about the scientific aspect of it is because the Great Lakes are called that for a reason. I mean, it's basically a giant hole in the middle of North America, filled with water, pretty much. You know, they're very large. Why couldn't they have some type of tsunami? You know what I mean? Like what would the science be behind that to where, you know, why couldn't it? Now, would it be so bad that, you know, it would cause all that damage? You know, I guess we don't know because I don't think that's ever happened.
Well, Lake Superior, how it goes is there's Lake Superior, and then that's the one that's kind of between like Minnesota and Canada. That's the one that's like always cold. You know, it's not really. But the wreck of the Esmond Fitzgerald, which is a Gordon Lightfoot song, was about there. It was a big shipping lake, and all the Great Lakes kind of connect and go basically from the center of the United States and Canada out into the Atlantic Ocean, right?
Right.
And they're all kind of descending as well. Like Lake Superior's at a higher elevation, and then Lake Michigan's below it. elevation wise, right?
Right.
Going from northwest to southeast is kind of how they run. I mean, you know what the fucking United States looks like. I don't need to explain the Great Lakes to you, but Lake Superior is so big that if it's got enough water to where it would cover all of North and South America.
Yeah.
That's how much water is in Lake Superior, North and South America, with 1 foot of water, and
Right, they're large, yeah.
that is just fucking Lake Superior. Lake Michigan is the second largest, but so it's smaller, but it still has a surface area of 22,300 square miles. So that's a big fucking body of water. Now, whether or not you can build up the momentum to have that all come down in a giant tsunami wave that would where you would actually empty out the Great Lakes. I don't know. I mean, think about like yourself in a bathtub, right? Like, can you really, when you were a little kid and you were in a bathtub and you'd kind of like rock back and forth, you can splash around and you can, kind of fuck up the bathroom a little bit, but you're not making the same kind of waves that you would in a wave pool or when you would run around a swimming pool in a circle. You know what I mean? One of the things that so of course, like you go on the message boards, right? And like, there's people like backing up, the earthquake prophecy and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the ones that's kind of interesting, though, especially people that know me IRL, is that one person commented that in mid 1997 we met a brother in the Lord who shared that while he was working on a construction job in Chicago, driving pilings in the ground for the foundation of the Marina Towers, they discovered part of a fault line, which he said apparently ran east and west. This struck me as very interesting in that the massive fracture shown to me in 1973 followed the same general line or area he talked about. So Marina Towers is actually where I worked, and I was at Marina Towers reading this shit. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I was in the tunnel that was right off the Chicago River.
Oh, no.
And I went down there and I was like, well, and of course I couldn't, and then the fault line appeared to me. No. But it was the idea that there could be parts of the New Madrid that extend that far into the city, and that part of it was spotted by construction crews. Like, that's really interesting. Once again, the science backed it up, right? Maybe there's a secondary fault system, or maybe this is just one isolated fault that's that far north, but maybe could be triggered because of something with the New Madrid, half a state away.
Well, I mean, I do think it's interesting because, just with reading all of this, like I said, I kind of mentioned my synchronicities with it earlier, but like I've had a couple, like the fact that the fact that when this first happened in 1811, it happened on December 16th. That is a synchronicity for me because the Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15th in 1967. And then my daughter's birthday is December 17th. So like it's weird because I've been kind of creating this timeline of synchronicity for myself. And I guess if I went back to I don't look for it. That's what makes it a synchronicity. Like, I don't dig to create this timeline of odd, strange, events. It just kind of happened. So that was interesting. And then another thing is on that guy's website, the website that you were talking about, when you read the prediction or whatever, he kind of makes a big deal about the O'Hare Airport. Like, he really goes into great detail about that.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is that that's mostly where the Mothman sightings have been happening there in Chicago, actually. Yeah. So, and then you have kind of your own story about, Marina Tower and stuff like that. So, it is very interesting. Is there anything to it? That's the thing about synchronicity. You either believe in coincidences or you don't. And and I don't happen to believe in coincidence. I believe in synchronicity. So, I mean, there might be something to it. I do think it's interesting to think about the possibility of having those lakes react to the earthquake. And then, like I said, like we talked about earlier, the earthquake could cause issues with Yellowstone. And, can you imagine the fucking this big earthquake goes off, it fucking destroys local structures and, kills people that way. But then at the same time activates the fucking volcano at Yellowstone and causes tsunami of the Great Lakes. It could be bad news. It could be bad news.
Can I read? So I don't want to get into reading too much of this because I could just read the whole fucking thing from start to
Yeah,
finish.
sure.
We could release an Audible, I guess, if we want to do like yeah, for the Patreon members, we could do a dramatic reading of the Chicago earthquake, which we should. The last podcast I had, we used to do readings of like stage plays and shit.
Okay.
And like radio plays. I think it would be neat if that's something that we. No, never mind. But here's just an excerpt from the Chicago earthquake prophecy. Over the years since 1973, the Lord by his holy Spirit has continued to give a deeper understanding of this disaster of disasters. Today, we know that Chicago will be the center of an earthquake that will have an approximate destructive radius of 300 miles. We believe it will be the worst earthquake ever recorded in human history, second to none in destructiveness. The cities that will be flattened by this earthquake will be Chicago, Illinois, St. Paul, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Missouri, Louisville, Kentucky, Indianapolis, Indiana, Detroit, Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Kansas City, Missouri. Southern Ontario and parts of southwestern Quebec, Canada will be obliterated by the waters of the Great Lakes as they backwash, and just before they return as a wall of water over Chicago and other areas. The Lord, by his Holy Spirit, revealed that the sound of the cracking of the ground will be so fierce that windows will be shattered in Des Moines, Iowa, some 316 miles from Chicago. So that's a pretty big fucking area of destructiveness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it describes like, the swirling waters and people dying and bands of ruffians that lose God and all humanity, kind of just like raping and killing and fighting over toilet paper in the streets. And and then it gets into, so here's the second part. Then it gets into and if you look at the there's nofearpreps.com, Chicago earthquake, Russian invasion, call to arms. That has the prophecy, plus it has like the map that this guy drew of the way that the United States becomes basically occupied. And it pretty much turns into Red Dawn, right?
Yeah.
Where like Russia comes in on the East Coast, Asia comes in on the West Coast. Yeah. They fight basically in the Midwest is destroyed. And it's just that brings a whole different level of kind of chaos to this story. But what's interesting is that, you want to talk about how realistic some of these predictions are. So the earthquake prophecy itself, when you look at the New Madrid fault line and the way things kind of shake out with, the Great Lakes draining into the Midwest and all this stuff. I mean, look, I can't tell you that that's going to happen or it's not going to happen, but it seems somewhat believable and it's fanciful enough, to where you're like, okay. But the second part of it, where in lieu of it, in response to a natural disaster striking the United States, that our enemies then use that opportunity to try to occupy the country. That's something that pushes a lot of buttons with people, and that's the other reason that this prophecy gets a lot of traction, is because there's a lot of people that believe that as well.
Yeah, that's very
that.
True.
All it's going to take is one sunspot to wipe out our grid. All it's going to take is one bad earthquake or whatever. And these other countries that have been, eyeball fucking us for the past 30 years.
Come in and take advantage.
Yeah.
And rape our women.
Exactly.
Apparently that's the center of all. No, it's not the center, but gosh, isn't it always in there somewhere? It's got to be rape. Why aren't they raping? Well, I mean, they got to exert their dominance, right?
I mean, why I think it is? I think because the only reason these prophecies kind of elicit a reaction out of somebody is because you're hitting their fear button. right? So why did this prophecy kind of like latch onto my subconscious is because I live in Chicago,
Right.
and you're talking about a tsunami hitting fucking Chicago.
Right.
I I like to think that I'm pretty much living in a tsunami free area. Well, guess again, motherfucker. Not necessarily. Even though you live in the middle of the United States, you too can still be fucking struck down by tsunamis. And as ridiculous as that sounds, there's a part of me that's like, oh shit, you know.
There's a
So
tsunami.
that's why, yeah. So that's like why this was like something that I always like was kind of passionate about, I guess you'd say. And when you talk about these foreign forces like trying to occupy the country, like yeah, because and then they're gonna yeah, of course that's every man's biggest
And then we're
fear
gonna
is
get
that
raped.
like yeah, is that not only are they gonna because when they kill you, it's over. Right,
That's
but if they fuck your ass and they're a dick about it,
yeah.
then that's something you just got to live with,
Yeah.
you know.
True.
And
True.
that's more terrifying to somebody is to have to, which is crazy because if you say that like male culture is one that lives in constant fear of fucking rape, then why are we such disgusting rapists some of the times? Like I don't know.
Like we can't be
Like,
mad at anybody but ourselves.
yeah. Right.
Meanwhile, women are like, rape is horrible. And then secretly they're like, God, I wish I could just get raped real good one time. I shouldn't make that joke. That's absolutely terrible.
See, you want to know something even more fucked up? I didn't even think you were joking.
I
I thought
mean,
you were just, I thought you were just being real for a second.
I
Like,
mean, a lot of women have that rape fantasy. They do.
oh my god, yeah. Oh my god, I had
Almost
one
every
chick.
woman's like, oh yeah, they think they're really kinky because they have that rape fantasy, and it's like it's not that. It's just, it's because like, especially during now that we are so independent and so we don't need no man. It's exciting to think that like our entire life can be in the hands of the opposite sex. And I mean, not even just that. I think gay women have that too. Even of course, they don't want to
I
get raped by a man, but
I think yeah, I think people think about all kinds of crazy shit when they're jerking off, and I'm not one to fucking pass judgment. But I know that I had a chick in my past, like probably 15 years ago, if not longer. Yeah, 15 years ago. And she had that fantasy and was like,
yeah,
I want to come over. And I was I had a roommate at the time, but like whatever, I'm going to come over and I want you to kind of like smack me around and rip my clothes off me and kind of tie me up and fuck me really hard. And I was like, I'm going to be leaving. And I was not dating this girl. Like I knew her and like it wasn't the first time we had
okay.
done it, but like this was when I was in a band. So she was like a crazy like groupie chick. And I was like, that's a lot of physical evidence. And you're
Right.
asking me to leave on you. I'm going to need you to sign something up front
Yeah.
saying that I'm going to do all these things to you and leave all this physical evidence on your body. And when you do that, then I will do all that. But
Happily.
yes, but until then, I do not fucking trust you enough
I've only
to
ever played
leave.
with that idea with one partner because for me it would have to be somebody that I would like trust completely, and that kind of takes away from the fantasy, because then it's not, you know what I mean? Then it's not real. Like it breaks the illusion. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's not terrible. I don't want somebody to break into my house and rape me. I don't think that that's a great idea. But would I want a partner to pretend that they were? Maybe, yeah.
Well,
You
so
know.
then you get to the point where it's like, what are they pretending to be? Is it just the non-reluctance thing or is it that it's a stranger? Because you can pretend like you don't know me. We can pretend like we don't know each other. I can hop out of the closet like a fucking magician and pretend that I'm somebody that I'm not. Or is it just a matter of you say no and I do it anyway? Because that type of shit happens in fucking marriages where like the people have known each other for
Oh,
30,
yeah.
30 fucking years and something goes south and something happens. Or so I'm told. I wouldn't know firsthand, but I'm just saying that like that kind of, you hear about that stuff happening all the time. So I think you really have to kind of unpack exactly what the fantasy is for you. Is it to be taken by force or is it to be taken by someone that you don't know?
I agree
And I
with
think
that for the most
different
part.
people, yeah, different people, there's different things about each one of those scenarios that kind of like push their buttons,
Yeah.
and
I think for the most part, it's just more about Like it's just being, I mean, really it's just them being like extra dom. And I think that's it really. And I think you can get the same type of fulfillment from telling your partner like, listen, I'd like you to treat me like a whore. And then they do, you know,
Right.
you know, then again, you know, I'm typically the dom and I don't sub for most anyway, you know, so I can't really give too much advice on that. But yeah, I mean, that's, you know, anyway, here we go,
Well,
Mr. Belvedere.
this kind of this well this going back to being invaded by the Russians. This kind of I think goes back to something that we were talking about with the 9/11 episode, where we're not used to seeing too much action on American soil.
Right.
So the idea that we would kind of be subject to the same type of treatment that we see in other countries, where we're an occupying force that moves from one village to the next, rounding up guns and dissidents and kind of treating, having people treat us the same way that we treat, you know, the Vietnamese or the Afghans or, you know, I don't know, fucking whatever the Germans treated the French in World War II. It's almost kind of like chickens come home to roost. Like
Yeah.
it's in our country's collective unconscious that we have perpetrated these acts against other people.
Right.
And it's only a
we
matter
know
of
that we deserve it, you know. So
yes.
it's
So
going
and that's what all of this fucking evangelical fucking end of the world shit is like guilt.
right.
And like us saying that like that we think this shit's going to happen. We want to believe this shit's going to happen because we think that we're so bad as a species that this shit is going to happen. And then, but what's interesting too is it's not even. And then these fucking people don't even really think it's them. They think that it's like the godless Democrats in Chicago that brought this wrath of God shit down upon them. And I'm just some dude in Boise trying to protect my farm, and that's why like I'll stack up on guns so that when the Russians come to my small town, I'll die fighting before I let them fuck my mouth, you know. Or whatever these people jerk off to at night. Like I said, it's different shit for everybody. But yeah, this is like the great American like, you know,
the great American
end times,
fear.
the great American end time prophecy, you know, and Midwestern with a definite Midwestern bent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which interestingly enough, I tried to find as much info on Chuck Youngbrand as possible. Couldn't find a ton, but he's definitely not from Chicago. I think he's from like South Dakota or something.
Oh God.
So I don't know why he's got such a detailed. But maybe that lends credence to the fact these were visions from God, because he has very detailed descriptions of the destruction of the fucking Cal City, you know, and Des Plaines
to Chicago. I don't know.
Des Plaines, yeah, the tri-state.
Those fucking Chicagoans. Well, okay, so I was kind of talking about earlier, again, more the sciencey side of it, you know, to kind of get back to that and kind of come back to a close, kind of let you sleep tonight, Pat, is that, you know, this is going to happen. This fault line it's going to shift, and it's going to cause a giant earthquake. That's inevitable. We don't know when. It could be in our lifetime. There's a pretty decent chance that it could be in our lifetime. It might not. But it could be, but it will happen one of these days. And when it does happen, I don't think the threat is realistically going to be volcanoes or tsunamis or anything like that. I think the threat is going to be exactly what we are looking at right now. We are not prepared to handle that kind of natural disaster.
Oh God, no.
Right. And like I said, you know, going back again to the pandemic, look how we're handling it. Or, you know, just look at any given day, how we're handling, you know, last year we had the big tornado events happen here in Dayton. And, you know, we weren't prepared for that. We know that tornadoes can happen. They do happen a lot here. But you don't get fucking 18 tornadoes in one goddamn night. And 3 of them were like category 4 or some shit, whatever. I don't even know how they fucking measure tornadoes. But they were bad, you know, and we're not used to that shit. And still, even, you know, over a year and a half later, we're still dealing with it. And, you know, I went down to like some of the more affected areas. I was very lucky because I live in Dayton, but I don't live in a suburb of Dayton. So I, you know, don't actually live in Dayton. You know, but we weren't affected where I'm at, thank God. But, you know, going down, I remember I went down probably about 2 or 3 days after it happened to kind of go and see for myself what was going on. And you couldn't even drive down the streets. It was awful. And,
Yeah.
you still see a lot of that. I was down there again recently when I went to the drive-in. It's in that area. And, I went down there and just kind of, seeing it compared to what I saw last year when it happened, and then what I had seen in previous years before that to what it was. And like, we're still not done rebuilding. So like when you're talking about having these giant earthquakes in an area that doesn't even have earthquakes to begin with, we're just so fucking unprepared for that. And that's where it's going to be bad. We're going to have all these people that are displaced, that don't have, places to go, that have lost everything. All these people are going to be, nobody even knows what to do. If I go and ask go outside and ask one of my neighbors, hey, what are you supposed to do during an earthquake? They don't fucking know. They live in Ohio, they have no idea what to do. They're going to run outside and, try to get in their cars and go to their mom's house. I don't know. But, we don't know. We're not prepared for that. And then, so people talk shit about, how governments, how we see it with the pandemic, how a pandemic shouldn't be a political thing. And it shouldn't be a political thing. However, if the government doesn't come up with a plan before these things happen, then who the fuck is going to? And then who's going to then initiate what happens during the aftermath to fix it? And so, I think that we need to be prepared for this stuff, because again, it's inevitable. Is it going to happen in the next 100 years? Probably. But even if it doesn't, we should have and even then. So when it happened in the early 1800s, they did actually end up passing some laws that were, for the time, that applied to the things that they needed to help the people that were affected by these earthquakes. But now those laws aren't relevant anymore. And I know that like one thing that they've talked about doing is making different building codes. So that way, buildings in these areas can withstand earthquakes, because currently we're not building things to withstand earthquakes because, again, they're not a threat.
Not the same way that California is. I know that from a construction standpoint.
Yeah.
That like we still use black iron pipe for all of our construction when it comes to water, and that's just basically because we have to think about the winters and making sure pipes don't freeze and shit. Whereas
True.
in California they let you use PVC,
Right.
which I'm sure you know from your kink endeavors is a flexible form of plastic. So just things like that where like we really don't build buildings thinking that we're
Thinking about
see
earthquakes.
much of
We don't
right.
we don't feel like we have to until it happens. And then we're like, shit, we should have thought about earthquakes.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that that's important. But I think that that's going to be the bigger devastation. Is it going to be the end of the world? I don't think that's a threat anymore. I used to think that, but after doing some more reading as an adult, I feel like most of it is just, the fear mongering that has happened with it over the years, with the expectations and the prophecies and, stuff like that. But I don't think that's realistic. I just think that, we're going to have a tough time when it does happen. So, I think you're safe, Pat. I don't think you're going to get raped by Russians or Asians.
I wasn't worried about that.
I don't think you're going to drown in a tsunami.
I don't want to drown in dirty water. That's my biggest thing.
Right. Yes, especially the fucking water from the lakes. You're right. That's for sure. But I don't think that's going to happen. So,
do you have a reoccurring? Because I dream about floods too. Like that kind of extends beyond just this, and this one specific prophecy. Like that's something that I don't know. It's always been a motif in my life. I can't say for sure that it's like prophesizing my own doom. I don't know if it's from a past life and that's how I died. I certainly don't get the past life vibe a lot, but when it could be one possible explanation for this. And it's not like I don't like to swim. I'm very natural in the water. I swim. That was like my exercise as a kid, and like even now, like I always
did you
bring
ever
me to the
have an
beach.
incident as a kid with water?
No. I loved it. I spent my summers at a pool. That's all I did. Is me and my friends would swim and we'd wrestle in the water and shit. Like, so I have zero phobia about swimming. I don't like oceans. That to me is too vast for me to wrap my head around. I like swimming pools. I like lakes and things that I can see the other side of or something. Um, boats I'm not too crazy about, but that's just because anyone that's ever gone sailing knows what a fucking pain in the ass it is. And anyone that's ever been in a speedboat that runs out of gas or has engine trouble knows how inefficient form of travel it is. You know what I mean? Like, so I have issues with boating kind of all around. But I mean, put me on a lake on a pontoon and I'll be fucking set, dude. Put it with a Bob Seger greatest hits CD and some fucking wine coolers and dope.
Well,
But
that makes sense.
going back to you, do you have anything that like you kind of like, I guess I don't even know how you would describe it, but you have a connection with, like, maybe it's fire, maybe it's flying or I don't know what, but
I don't know. I'm in love with the moon. I don't know if that I don't know if that's the same
okay.
thing. But I do have this very special relationship with the moon, I believe, which is weird because I don't really know if it's a entity so much. I'm not sure. I just know that I feel some type of kinship there for whatever reason. But like, I don't know. I mean, as far as like a fear or anything like that, I mean, I have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm scared to death of everything.
No, no, I think you kind of described it the right way. Is that I don't think it's a fear necessarily either.
Okay, just something that
It's some kind
resonates
of
with you. Is that
it's
what you're saying?
a weird relationship, a kinship. I mean, I think that
Well,
was the right word to use.
being a witch, I mean, I have a lot of those, so it's, so it can be difficult to kind of, pinpoint something very specific because I can see myself in natural occurrences, like I can relate on certain levels with different elements, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
which is really hard to explain to people that don't know, but it's
Well,
but
we're doing an episode on this. I mean, we're in a week or two
yeah.
anyway, so I
Yeah,
mean, you
yeah,
can
yeah,
lay the
that's true.
groundwork.
That's true. So we'll say it more. I mean, I have this like weird, I have these like reoccurring dreams that I find dead things in places that I shouldn't find dead things.
Like
Um,
above ground.
well, so like, well, so yeah, I mean, like one dream that I have is like, like I'm in my room and my room is like horribly like trashed and typically it's from some type of event, but which is kind of weird. But it's something that I haven't dealt with in the dream, and then I'll go and when I finally start to deal with it, I'll like start digging out like dead animals that have been there for like weeks at a time, and it's weird, but this is something that I dream about a lot, and usually it. I mean, it must stem from the fact that I feel like I don't deal with things adequately and in a timely manner because usually that's what it is because they're not just like they just died or it's recently dead or something like that. Like these are things that have been like rotting for a long time, so I don't know. And it's not just like my room, that's like one I can remember, but it'll be like different things like helping clean out a house fire, which I guess would make sense, but like it's a house fire that's been there for weeks and there's just like dead people in it, and I don't know, it's a weird thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could psychoanalyze those a couple different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
It's stuff from your past or toxic things or just things that don't belong there that you need to get rid of that are kind of fucking up the soup.
Well, that's what I
You
think.
know,
Yeah, I think it's just unhealed, trauma from having a traumatic life. So that's
right?
that's just part of it. But yeah, but yeah, it is weird because I don't typically remember my dreams, but I do remember those. Those are the ones that like I usually like I have and they're reoccurring as a theme. But then I don't remember the other ones usually. So I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. But yeah, I mean, as far as like things resonating and stuff like that, we'll definitely get into that in a further, in a different episode, in more detail once I can feel like I can properly prepare and explain for the people that don't get it.
Yeah, I watched The Craft for the first time on Sunday night in preparation for the witch
Oh, did you
episode.
in preparation?
Yeah, so
That's not a good. You should watch Practical Magic. That's probably a little bit.
that's funny because that's the movie my wife suggested. I was like, fuck that. The that's the Nicole Kidman uh
Yeah,
what's her
Sandra
name?
Bullock, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the guy in that?
Some guy. I don't know. I mean, he is a, there's two. I mean, I think both of them are pretty famous. I haven't watched that movie in like, I don't know, probably 15 years.
Yeah, that was like right on Amazon. It was like right next to The Craft.
You should
She
watch
was like,
it.
oh,
Have you ever watched it?
no, it seemed too Lilith Fair for me. Like at least the
Yeah.
Craft was kind of angry, and this
Yeah.
was just like, oh, it's like a CW show for people in their late 20s or something.
I mean, it's definitely it's definitely like a rom-com
Yeah.
and
Well, yeah, because
drama.
they're like sisters or something.
Yeah, they're like sisters and like, they're witches. So like, that's it's a rom-com, but they're witches.
Gotcha.
It's not terrible. But but it does a pretty decent job of actually, depicting the craft. Huh? And it's not, I feel like it's better than the craft is at that. But then again, I don't know, the way I do things is also extremely different. So, we'll just have to get into that. But
Sure.
anyway, that's coming. That's coming up. So we have a lot of stuff planned. I'm excited. We're hoping to do the Dogman next week. I
Oh,
don't
we are?
adhere to a schedule though, but um,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
I'm
I,
hoping
I,
that's
oh,
good.
go on.
No, I'm hoping that that's where we're going, and I'm hoping that, I'm trying to plan out this surprise for you guys, and I hope that it's it happens. So
Okay.
big
Well,
surprise.
hopefully it's not a big ass earthquake.
It's gonna be a big yes, it's gonna be a big earthquake. We didn't even talk about the Native Americans or anything. You know what? We might just cover Native American lore one day on a whole episode because there's so much. Um, Anyway, all right. Well, before we go off on another tangent about Mr. Belvedere, um,
I was gonna bring up the Ant-Man actually, but uh, I'm glad you stopped me.
yeah. We're already we're deep in it. So,
Okay.
anyway, guys. All right. Well, we will be back next Wednesday.